Hi guys and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, this is Jen Gaeta Siciliano from Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. Thank you for joining me. Today I'd like to share Chapter 3 of my memoir, Not As Crazy As You Think. If you missed Chapters 1 and 2, you could check them out. From Season 1, they are Episodes 5 and 6. You can catch the podcast in any podcast location or go to my Not As Crazy As You Think YouTube channel at Siciliano Jen. So now, please enjoy Chapter 3 to learn more about my first impression of India as a young girl of 22. Chapter 3, The Brahman Class. Captain, we've got a lock on her. She's the one, said Lieutenant Dan. What's the protagonist's story? Asked Captain Spock. Chief Number 1 began. I'm reading that she's a shapeshifter, a being that can morph into other bodily forms, who must fulfill her destiny in the end times as a freedom fighter for artists and people of color. She is woman. She is compassionate empath. She is warrior for justice. She is creative intuitive. Added Lieutenant, in this lifetime, it looks like she's meant to figure out the theory of everything. Funny thing is, as brainy as she can be, nobody takes her seriously because she's a loudmouth Italian from New Rochelle with a slight Bronx accent, who sometimes appears to have an attitude problem. Realized Captain Spock, that means in this life, she needs to prove herself. Let's see what's happening now. After an exhausting 24-hour KLM flight, I sat around a long while in front of the baggage claim waiting for Sumit to pick me up at the New Delhi airport. Cabbies muscled luggage around me like bales of cotton as native travelers scurried into the haphazard people patterns like dogs on the loose. An increasing unease settled in my throat as the seconds and minutes dropped off into the eternal void. What if Sumit had forgotten me? What if he screwed me over and didn't follow through with hosting my visit? It was not unlike him to do such a thing. And then suddenly, as his head popped out amongst the shorter Indians in the crowd, I spotted him at the entrance. He walked over to me with a leisurely pace like he was perusing the vitamin aisle at the grocery store with no intention to buy. Seeming unenthusiastic, indifferent, no longer did he wear an air of arrogance, but appeared small and unimpressive. Hello there, Sumit! I threw my arms around him, thrilled that he was appropriate enough to show up. With some irritation, he said, I hate the airport. Too many Indians. What's all this? He pointed to my 2 mammoth suitcases for a trip of 2 weeks, instead of the intended backpack. I was beginning to regret my choice of bringing the cumbersome load, and Roscoe insisted on my traveling light, but somehow every article in my cargo seemed absolutely necessary for this trip. You think I brought too much? Yeah, I would say so, he jibed. Sumit had little to say during the car ride, looking straight ahead and appearing preoccupied. I opened my Fodor's travel guide to review with him our trip ahead. Well, there is no way I am missing the Taj Mahal. That is a must. We can arrange that, he said. And when we head down south to Madras, we have to hit that amazing Hindu monument that Professor Greenwood raves about. He cut me off and said abruptly, I'm not going to be able to travel along with you. Shocked, my mouth froze open like a frog in a swamp, focusing on a stupid fly. You can stay at my house for as long as you need to before your trip, but I can't join you because I just started a job with my uncle at the television station, and I can't break away. Well, when did you start the job? 2 weeks ago. Well, why didn't you tell him when you started that you had a trip planned? He wouldn't have let me go anyway, and my dad was really pressuring me to work. I've been hanging around the house since graduation, and he was fed up with me, so I needed to do it. But you can go. You'll be fine. I stared at him numb and in sheer disbelief. Did he really think I could handle this trip alone, not having traveled before in any foreign land, much less a third world country? But you promised me about this, Sumit, I contended, my fury beginning to build. We had made plans a long time ago. Why didn't you tell me your plans had changed before I jumped on the flight? Maybe I wouldn't have come if I knew this. I tried desperately to control pending quivers in my voice for fear of appearing unable to manage this trip after all. But the truth was, I would have come anyway. I was headstrong in following my gut instinct that led me here, a conviction I began to nervously question now in my emerging situation. And I had also bought a cheap, non-refundable ticket. I couldn't live with myself knowing I sacrificed all my savings without gaining at least some kind of experience that would go along with the purchase. At least I got myself here with a clear mind. Now I had to figure out what to do next. Jen, traveling in India is not a big deal. Everyone knows English. It wasn't just a language barrier I was concerned about, but a cultural one. I tried to focus on slowing down the galloping of my heart that fell into my stomach by taking in measured breaths, and I managed to calm down a little. Okay, whatever. I guess I'll be fine. I fell silent for the rest of the ride. I felt betrayed and disillusioned by Sumit. He was not an adventurer like me. He was born into it all, into his class, into opportunities to travel, to go abroad to study, and to live off his parents' money. My original plans now disintegrating before me, I hoped that in the end, Roscoe's doubts about the success of my trip would not be warranted. Upon my entrance, Sumit's father bombarded me with his steady interrogation. A protocol, I was warned, was the standard routine for all passing travelers through his home. He shook my hand firmly and said, "So, you are Jennifer. And what religion are you?" Taken aback, I responded, "Well, I was raised Catholic, but today I believe that truth and value exists in every religion." In fact, I wasn't sure what I truly believed. I didn't know if there was absolute truth about God. What I knew for sure was that all religions seemed to have something in common, an interest in connecting to something larger, in making meaning of our relationship to the rest of the universe or beyond. And it seemed that each religion developed in different areas of the world to serve the various needs of their own people. As Rumi, the Sufi poet, said, "How many paths are there to God? There are as many paths to God as there are souls on the earth." He took a moment and then narrowed his eyes at me, saying, "Does that mean, as a Christian, one of your goals is to help people?" Mr. Nayar was as tall as his only son, and Sumit resembled him in posture and attitude, but not in countenance. His father's face was misshapen, and he had a lazy eye and a twisted and fixed look of scrutiny on his face, as though he was perpetually studying the world through a skeptical vision, incessantly judging his environment and the people in it with a hard-nosed and unforgiving perspective that could warp the facial features of any man. "Well, I suppose so," I answered casually. "That idea feels good to me, but I don't consider myself only a Christian." "I see." Just then, Summit's mother ran out from the kitchen with open arms and gave me a warm embrace. "Oh, you're finally here. It's so great to meet you." She wore a sari that was a soft shade of yellow with a veil gracefully wrapped around her head. She wore severely thick glasses, and I wonder if she was that blind or if in India they hadn't yet attained thinner modern lenses. She must have heard her husband's presumptuous tone and with embarrassment said, "Just ignore him and make yourself at home." The living room was neat and clean, with an open, airy feel and a light but comfortable humidity in the air. It smelled fresh, green. Plants surrounded the periphery of the room, and pastel oriental rugs, well worn and faded, covered the tan wooden floors. In the corner was a white grand piano, and lace curtains delicately framed every window. The father stepped over Mrs. Nayar's hospitable graces and continued, "So, are you truly altruistic, or are you just doing it selfishly, so that you can feel good?" I was learning that in Hinduism, helping the poor was viewed as interfering with karmic punishment. But since Sumit told me his father was an atheist, it seemed like a strange topic to be fixated on upon a first exchange. Again altering the direction of the discourse, Mrs. Nayar interjected, "Don't worry about him. He is interested in everyone's agenda when they are traveling to India, and he is always slightly suspicious. But he means no harm and likes to challenge people." Sumit had demonstrated this instigating trait in his own personality as well, which currently appeared void and blank. While dinner was prepared, Sumit and I went to his room and chatted a bit, and within that comfortable seclusion, he seemed a little more himself. I asked him, "You seem different here in your own country. Why is that?" "I'm getting by. I don't know, I guess I'm a little depressed. Living with my parents is no fun," he confessed. Sumit's sister, Aida, peeped her head through his bedroom door without knocking. "Are you guys ready for dinner?" "Yeah, I'd love that. I'm starved," I said. Aida was 2 years Sumit's junior and his feminine version, tall, slender, walking with a swagger, but she was softer in her light-hearted demeanor and had a sweet cheerfulness about her, a true foil to Sumit. When we sat for dinner, I noticed fresh salad was prepared by the in-house chef. I whispered to Mrs. Nayar that I really should not eat any vegetables unless they were cooked extremely well and long. Visibly insulted by this, she said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. You have nothing to worry about here. We are very clean." Sumit and his father chuckled softly, but I knew it was a risk. One thing that everyone, the museum scientists, the traveler's guide, and most firmly Roscoe, advised me on was that in addition to the dozen or so pills and shots I needed to get before my travels, it was a must that I steer clear of the water. This meant no toothbrushing with it and no fresh food washed in it. I even had to be careful with purchasing bottled water in town because many vendors refilled used containers with street water to make money. But out of respect for this family, who had graciously taken me in as their guest, I submitted to eating the salad, and they all watched me with suspense until I took my first bite from the wooden bowl. "You will be fine," Mrs. Nayar said, satisfied with her insistence. The subsequent discussion at the dinner table was provocative and stimulating in an easy feel-good chit-chat, until Sumit began sharing his perspective on sports, and then American sports, and then America's ridiculous obsession with sports, and then blurted out in disgust, "Americans are arrogant assholes." A knot formed in the deep pit of my stomach. I had prepared myself for this. He was back to his old self, and I was ready to get down and dirty, enter our usual banter, and come to blows. In a snide tone, I answered back, "You're the one who's arrogant, Sumit." Dead silence hit. The Nayars glanced at each other with a look of disapproval, and their dismissive body language stabbed me like a knife. A shame rushed through my hot, flushed cheeks. I was not part of this family, and in his parents' eyes, I did not know the real Sumit, even though they had no clue what he became in my country, someone who got his jollies off insulting and hurting others. But Aida chuckled, and I knew she understood the truth, which was masked here, but truth nonetheless. As the dinner discourse continued, the carefree and bubbly energy that lit up our conversation only moments prior had fizzled. I reminded myself that during my journey, I needed to blend in, not stand out. I was asked to take the wash at night because the family needed the bathroom in the morning. Cleaning rituals are difficult in India for the average spoiled American. There is no toilet paper because most houses are not equipped with pressurized toilets that can handle it, and Indians use a small urn in one hand to pour water on their backside, as the left hand is used to wipe it clean. I naively expected the Nayars to have a westernized shower set up in their bathroom, but instead I encountered a large barrel of clean water akin to a plastic garbage can and a small hand bucket resting in the corner of a rather spacious concrete room. I dipped the small bucket in the barrel and poured the cold water over my nude body, and it splashed onto the slanted floor with a small drain in the center of the room where gravity brought water and suds. The Nayars were proud to live within modest means, and this was the proof they had of being aware of their position in life while self-righteously connecting to the commoners. But thankfully they had a regular toilet, and even though there was no TP, I had brought a stash of my own. I rose from my slumber the next morning, overwhelmed with fatigue, the jet lag gripping me in a headlock. But Sumit wanted to take me early to the street market, so I needed to push through it. New Delhi's overpopulated, congested streets were base and dirty, and diffused in the air was curry-ingested body odor. The streets swelled with frenzied movement, and speeding vehicles rapidly wove in and out of traffic, loose and random in undefined lanes, with seemingly no traffic laws whatsoever or even a basic engineered traffic light system. The market's intensity was a psychic overload. Along the sidewalks, jam-packed like Midtown Manhattan at rush hour in the morning, artisans squatted and wove threads, and beside them were displayed hand-painted textile art, wood carvings, and hand-stitched tapestries on the ground. And along the wider streets, desperate merchants hustled American knockoff jeans, purses, and T-shirts to their hometown people in a city far, far away from Western life, offering the chance to wear a sacred image of wealth, American style. Their customers were purchasing a dream. Sumit bought some street vendor food that looked delicious, tandoori chicken on a stick, and although tempting, I stuck to all the warnings I had received. Cooked repeatedly in the same oils, it's common for foreign bacteria to thrive in it, so I stayed away with caution. Later that night after dinner, Mrs. Nayar approached me and said, "Let us talk. Just me and you." We climbed up to the roof, which was a flat black top, where one could gaze upon the stars, and sat on the stairs at the top of the landing. Mrs. Nayar turned to me, smiled, and asked with a most curious tone, "Do you intend to marry my son?" I was stunned. I most certainly did not come to India with the intention of marrying Sumit, but in the middle of my attempt to deny her imaginative fantasy, she interrupted me, saying, "In India, women are traditional. We may seem different in that we are reserved, but we support our men and know when to let them take charge. This takes strength. Many American women are arrogant." "Don't worry, I'm not after your son," I retorted. She then pushed herself forward and said with a probing urgency, "Why exactly are you here, then?" I paused at her directness and thought about my answer because it felt like a trap. "Well, I feel that I'm on a sort of spiritual journey." She then relaxed a bit and said, "Oh, I see. And you feel India is the place where you will find this?" "Yes, I don't know why, but I do." In the adjacent house below were her neighbors gardening, who clearly lived a significantly humbler lifestyle. She saw me staring and said, "Look at those people below. Really look at them. They are not in the elite class as we are, but they are very happy. Everyone is very happy here, even the lowest classes. They all know their place and know they deserve their place." Although the Nayars could live a very affluent lifestyle, they had settled in a middle-class neighborhood so that they could be close to the people. But while their neighbors were up late at night around 9 p.m., working at the garden in their yard, seemingly for sustenance and not recreation, the Nayar family sat inside pondering their next visit to their guru's manor, while their servants cooked them gourmet meals and cleaned up the dishes. I questioned her, "Do you believe they deserve to be poor?" "Something they did long ago in another lifetime caused their current situation, and they intend to pay their karma." I began to see how this doctrine supporting the Indian caste system was used against its people, and in my travels I might continually come up against its justification. I continued, "But it isn't a preferred lifestyle. Shouldn't we try and help others who are less fortunate?" "Not necessarily. They are where they are for a reason, and we are not to question it." I noticed how the Nayars lived through one point of reference, namely, that their Brahman class at the top of the evolutionary pyramid knew best, and everyone else was beneath them. It may well have been that the neighbors below were stable and happy, but Mrs. Nayar was speaking for the rest of the social hierarchy as well, which absolved her of the guilt she might otherwise feel when she passed the Untouchables on the street. She believed she deserved her place in life, with entitlement and righteousness, and accepted no other reason nor responsibility for the surrounding caste system in which she found herself at the top. Her attitude left me uneasy, and I wondered how she viewed me, a girl of a comparatively lower class in America. I'm sure she applied her belief system universally to all class structures in the world since it was based on God's will. Mrs. Nayar prattled on, explaining the nature of how God worked. I sighed with wonder and humility at the immovable stars above, believing that indeed, here in India, I was destined to find out the answers for myself in one way or another. The next day, the Nayar family took me to visit the Red Fort, an impressive Delhi testimony to the grandeur of the Mughal dynasty. We ambled along the grounds, and two young women travelers, possibly American, strolled a few yards ahead of us, holding notebooks in their hands. Mr. Nayar pointed to them and with a sneer said, "These Americans, what are they really doing here? I know for a fact that many of them are writers dissecting our culture and telling the world about India they know nothing about nor understand." Mrs. Nayar piggybacked, saying to me, "Many are sociologists with wrong ideas in their heads about India. Truly terrible. Things that are only best understood here in the larger context. They don't belong here and shouldn't even come to this country if they don't have anything good to say," added Mr. Nayar, shaking his head with disdain. After chatting about this subject in length, Mrs. Nayar turned to me and said, "So, you travel alone tomorrow? To the Taj, right?" "Yes, I'm so excited." "You will be more than fine. Be careful of robbers and diarrhea." Again with the diarrhea, I thought. And then she asked, "Do you know what causes diarrhea?" I knew she was getting at India's water problem for travelers, but I tried to be polite and offer her an easy segue. "Well, isn't diarrhea often caused by having too much water in your digestive system?" Suddenly, in unison, the whole family guffawed, taking a long time to recover as I sat there, patiently and expressionless. I was simply being nice because in America, a person got diarrhea either from a harmless passing virus or by eating too many peaches or prunes. I thought the family would surely know this, especially Mr. Nayar, since he was a doctor, but in their true snooty nature, they acted as though my statement was downright preposterous and that only a very stupid peon would say such a thing. "Oh, my dear, no, no, no! How silly! That is very funny. Traveler's diarrhea is serious and must be treated. Just be careful of what you eat, my love." Stated by the insistent woman who forced me to chew down her New Delhi water-washed salad. People can actually die from traveler's diarrhea in India. She then said, almost as if she was proud of such a cultural phenomenon, and also quite content with cursing me to a painful death. That evening, the Nayars brought me to a dissonant and numbing sitar ceremony, which they called the most advanced music in the world, followed by a royal class exclusive dining experience at their elite social supper club. All throughout appetizers, entree, and dessert, they pointed out every important person they knew, furnished with their title and degree of connection to the family, so esteemed to be part of such company. Later, Sumit invited me to attend a party with him at a friend's house. Now, watch this. These people are really something. The Brahman home we entered possessed the stature of a multi-million-dollar mansion in Beverly Hills, and it was as finely decorated and manicured as one would expect of a person from the highest caste in India. Handsome white-teethed men were sprawled languidly on the couch with stunning brown faces and standout features. Alongside them sat a group of young and gorgeous Indian women with flowing, shiny locks, who were donned in the highest fashion style of Paris. Their sexiness dripped with wetness as they scattered the room with cat-like alluring stares, appearing bored and aloof. These were the secular aristocrats of India's Brahman class, the Bollywood actors and producers, and New Delhi's finest young entrepreneurs, business owners, and trust fund kids. We joined the Tokefest circle in session behind the house on the patio, near the jade-illuminated pool, and I inhaled some of the strongest hashish my buds ever tasted. One of Sumit's friends, seemingly the ringleader of the crew, leaned back on his lounge chair and edged one foot up on the coffee table, tilting to and fro. Round, wire-rimmed glasses framed his dead eyes, exposing a discontented complacence typical of the high-class Brahmin. With his brown shoulder-length hair, he looked a little like John Lennon, but was sadly plain compared to the Beatle legend, as well as the royal peacocks inside. His complaining rant began about the beggars in the streets. "It's the absolute worst," he said. "Don't these beggars have any self-respect?" he whined. The first night I arrived, Sumit and his friends took me for a ride through New Delhi's downtown business area, which revealed a hauntingly pathetic sight as the pleading and desperate poor sat barefoot in mere loincloths along the side of the roads. We young preschool children, physically unusual and deformed because of malnourishment, resembled worn-out dolls with small heads. They surrounded our car and stuck their tiny hands inside the open window as they begged, "Money, money." Similar to this irritated architect, Sumit and his peers were unfazed and rather annoyed. The streets swarmed with this plagued sect of the population, the emaciated, leprosy-eaten, and three-quarters starved. Unlike New York City's homeless, who remained candidates for a normal life in a society that at least claimed itself upwardly mobile, these people were permanently stuck because of their caste and karma, which delivered an inescapable, punishing fate. Instead of feeling appreciative of his privileged place in society, this ungrateful architect was disgusted at the poor, and with a dripping tone of entitlement, he said, "Don't they even try to take care of themselves without taking from everyone else that has anything?" The complaining Brahmin continued, "It's a total scam. They have a pimp who collects all the money and sends them out there to beg for more, And they do okay, too. Don't think any different. They are making out with tons of cash without lifting a finger." He then went on to declare these people an abomination to society. At the same time, he sounded off about his unhappy job, how he worked so hard, and how although he created fantastic works of art and was paid a hefty sum of money for each commission, he did not feel any satisfaction from it. Once again, I could not contain myself. "Well, maybe you should try begging." My provocative remark caught his attention, and the rest of the smoke circle paused in a stone freeze with a few raised eyebrows. My attitude was again causing problems. The architect fixed his eyes on my visage, trying to figure me out, and I mustered up my New York street courage to meet his stare. Simultaneously, I observed my surroundings, careful to assess the strength of my enemy's posse. "And where are you from?" he asked, challenging me. "New York." I made the statement like Pacino's Serpico, affecting a don't-mess-with-me attitude as I eyed him down. He didn't say another word. When the next topic of Marxism entered the chat of this young and elitist Indian social circle, the budding intellectuals relished the subject like Americans talking about the upcoming Super Bowl, rambling on and on how if the political structure was instilled, it would rid India of all its problems. It was like watching a bunch of prima donnas who were getting their nails done at their favorite posh Upper East Side spa, explaining how they just wish there was world peace, for God's sake. Behind the rhetoric was a transparent, advanced apathy. It was doubtful that any of these verbal campaigners would ever back up their philosophies with one measured action that required any real effort. Afterward, they discussed their rational rejection of all things spiritual, while embracing naturalism as the only path in revealing truth. They patted themselves on the back for their smartness. In the middle of their prattle, I began to drift off into deep thought, triggered by the intensity of the potent hashish. Mathematical geometry flooded my mind, black and white swirls of numbers plunged in as I pondered the universal truth of figures and symbols, non-local and sacred, and then suddenly, non-stop feelings of godliness and bliss overwhelmed me, and I thought I might cry. I felt as though I was receiving some kind of special insight into the complexity of the universe. The thoughts and emotions were overflowing and wickedly intense, picking up speed, then racing furiously, and I became dizzy and a little nauseous. I teetered for a long while on the edge of no man's land. When my mind began to finally slow down, I inhaled slowly and applied rhythm to my breath. I looked around at the group I sat with, hoping no one had watched my bad trip. I looked at each one of them intently, so removed now that I could be a fly on the wall. I was not like them. My steadfast purpose in becoming a more sophisticated individual drove me to this far eastern land, for I so wanted to learn about people superior to my inheritance with ideas beyond my small and provincial background. I had rejected the place I came from because I envisioned a better one out there somewhere, but now I missed the world I knew. I missed America. I missed my ordinary family made up of good people with kind smiles. I missed the middle class I understood so well, with earnest goals and small successes earned from an honest day's hard work. A real satisfaction derives from this modesty, a real contentment. I was not content with myself here. I was alone and suddenly afraid. End of chapter 3. Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.